The final phase of Wrath Classic has hit the PTR, and there have been plenty of massive changes to the game, some of which you would have expected to have happened during Wrath of the Lich King. Others, not so much. As always with the PTR, things can change before they go live, but today I'm going to be going over all of the big updates that are currently coming to Wrath Classic in the final content phase. First up, it's finally happening. The Looking for Dungeon tool will be being added into Wrath Classic. It was originally added into the game during this final patch too, so in some ways it is matching how things were back then. I feel the leveling portion of the game especially will heavily benefit from this addition, and even when Wrath was releasing I felt as though getting groups together for the Vanilla and the Burning Crusade tier dungeons was going to be a pain, and that seems to have been the case. As for Wrath content, the LFD should be a good way for players to break into endgame gearing and avoid the often excessive player-made barriers involving gear score and experience for content which really doesn't require what people ask of it. There's always the option still to make your own group as well, and that will be faster if you just want to overgear the content. But otherwise, the Looking for Dungeon tool will be here. We do need to see how the LFD will work too. The first version of it in Wrath did have some issues which were later smoothed out, mostly during Cataclysm. In Warlords of Draenor, the LFD was merged into the Group Finder interface, which we do already have in the game and have had for some time now. I'm expecting it to look quite similar to how it is in retail currently, and it wouldn't be the first change made to the game that was in Warlords of Draenor originally, which we're going to be getting in this patch. More on that later though. There will also be a new Titan Rune dungeon difficulty, this time named Gamma. The extra mechanics are still to be confirmed, but we do know it will drop a currency similar to Sidereal Essence. I'd have to imagine you'll be able to spend this on presumably Trial of the Grand Crusader loot you have not been able to get via the raid yet. You will also be able to buy Primordial Saronite with this new currency too. In case you didn't know, Primordial Saronite are the new runed or Crusader orbs of the patch, and will be an expensive item dropped by bosses in Icecrown Citadel, which will be used in high-level crafting patterns and much more. This alternative way to get them should bring prices down a little bit, but there will be something else that will impact the price even more though. Again, we'll get onto that in a moment. The Icecrown dungeons, so Forge of Souls, the Pit of Sauron, and the Halls of Reflection will benefit from the extra rewards from the Titan Rune system, but will not have any extra mechanics. Blizzard said about this, these dungeons are only just now becoming available and are themselves a step up in difficulty over normal heroics. We felt it was important to protect the original 2009 experience here. We will publish more information discussing Defense Protocol Gamma and how these three dungeons fit into Wrath Classic's final patch in the coming weeks. That is everything in dungeons. On to the raid, Icecrown Citadel. There were a ton of changes made to this raid over its nearly year-long duration back in 2010, so how are things going to be these days then? This is what we know. Just as things have been with Trial of the Grand Crusader, Icecrown Citadel will be keeping the attempt system on heroic difficulty. This will be set to its final version, meaning you get 50 attempts per week across heroic bosses which incur this extra challenge, those being Putricide, Lanathel, Sindragosa, and the Lich King. Also, there won't be any attempts on normal. On top of that, Blizzard said there will be no restriction or gating to prevent access to later wings of the raid, and all will be fully unlocked at launch. So this means no staggered boss releases, everything will be available to clear straight away. This also follows how Blizzard released the Sunwell back at the end of TBC. Also, you will not have to have defeated the Lich King on normal mode before you can access heroic. As of doing this video, no news on the scaling buff has been made public yet. It's currently not on the PTR either, so we're gonna have to wait and see what they do with this one. Also, I have been PTRing ICC a bit. We only have gear from the live realms as the vendors haven't been updated to Trial of the Grand Crusader gear yet, and this raid on heroic with our gear at the moment is kind of hard. Definitely a return to a more challenging raid following Trial. Moving on, this next one is big for all the Shadowmourne users, and even if you thought you weren't likely to get one, that might have just changed for you. There have been big changes that make Shadowmourne both easier and more accessible to obtain for a wider variety of players. First up, you no longer need to funnel all the Primordial Saronite as a priority to your first Shadowmourne user. Shadowfrost shards will begin dropping from bosses even without having a player in the raid that's advanced to the Splintered Throne quest. Let me explain why this is a good thing. So in short, a very early part of the Shadowmourne quest needs 25 primordial selenite. This would have been a huge factor in the price of this item early on. On top of that, all of the special ways you need to defeat bosses with Shadow's Edge can be done at the same time as you're receiving Shadowfrost shards. You can see the full list of quests involved in getting the weapon here, but the Splintered Throne and getting the 50 Shadowfrost shards was by far the largest bottleneck. So the fact they're dropping straight away saves a ton of planning for guilds of all levels. Overall, this means Shadowfrost shards will drop from your first reset, and the price of primordial selenite will not be quite as insane early on. But wait, there's more. The drop rate of Shadowfrost shards will be the same on 25-player normal as 25-player heroic. Previously, the drop rate of Shadowfrost shards was estimated between 25 and 50% for normal, and 51 to 99% for heroic. So these days, even if you are not able to clear on heroic, you can drop it down to normal, get yourself some loot, get yourself some emblems, and of course a shard. And that is not all either. Now each end of wing boss, so Sourfang, Lanathel, Putricide, Syndragosa, and the Lich King will always guaranteed drop a single Shadowfrost shard. So that is at least 5 shards per reset if you're doing a full clear on at least 25 normal. Meaning with this new bad luck protection, assuming you're doing full clears, the longest it will take to make a Shadowmourne will be 10 resets or 2.5 months. And with good RNG, there's probably going to be somebody out there who will be wielding a Shadowmourne by week 5 or 6. Blizzard's reasoning here, so the intent of these changes is to accelerate the acquisition of Shadowmourne significantly. The original Icecrown Citadel raid tier lasted over 11 months in 2009 and 10, and whilst the Icecrown Citadel raid tier in Wrath Classic will last a good while, we felt it was important to allow Shadowmourne to be enjoyed by more people while the content is still current. In the original game, Shadowmourne could take anywhere between 18 to 24 weeks to complete, and similar to our adjustments to Valanir, Hammer of the Ancient Kings, we felt that we wanted to err on the side of fun here, rather than creating a situation where guilds may only be able to complete a very small number of Shadowmournes before the next major content update. We expect with these changes the time needed to complete Shadowmourne should be closer to 8 to 10 weeks. So by Blizzard's own estimations, they have more than halved the time it will take to get a Shadowmourne. And, well, if we think back, I remember seeing more Thunder Furies than I ever would have dreamed of in Classic. You didn't have to go too far to find a set of Warglaives in TBC. And even though the way you get Shadowmourne is different from these, the trend of just having more orange weapons in the game has been a mainstay for Classic so far. To be honest, without changes, you might have been finishing your second Shadowmourne with good RNG by the time the next major content patch came out, so I think that this makes sense for Classic. So there we go, Shadowmourne just got a lot easier to make. If you were third in line for it and thought it wasn't happening, it probably is now. Can't wait to see what a Blood DK DPS can do with Shadowmourne now. That's everything for Icecrown Citadel, let's move on. Do you like collecting stuff? Do you like having more bank space? Do you keep losing your heirlooms on your half a dozen level 70 something alts? Well, good news, as very unexpectedly, we are moving to a much more updated versions of the collections UI. The interfaces for pets, mounts and heirlooms have all been updated. The version we're looking at here was originally brought into the game in Warlords of Draenor as a general update to the UI. This keeps all your looms, pets and mounts in one place, and more importantly, makes nearly all of them account-wide. I guess the ones that won't be account-wide will be class-specific mounts like your Chargers or Felsteed, perhaps the rank 1 PvP mounts, that kind of stuff. Also, I decided to check how flying works account-wide, so here's my Shaman, who has regular flying, meaning if I use a standard mount such as a Griffin, they fly at 150% speed. But if I use a 310% speed mount, such as the Black Proto Drake, they were flying as if they did have epic flying. This is probably not intended in a PTR thing, and flying should scale to your level, and you do still need cold weather flying as well. One more thing on mounts, since they're going to be account-wide, the ZG mounts get removed from the game in Kata. This could happen as early as the pre-patch. So if you want them, now you can farm them on whichever character you can do the bosses on, and then use them later on your main. Your heirlooms will now be in one place as you learn them, and they're shown under the collections UI. You will automatically learn heirlooms when you log into a character that has them. There is still very much an argument for having a bankhold that holds your looms though, since they don't inherit enchants. You can also only put vanilla tier enchants on items at the moment. I'm not sure if or when this changes, to be honest. A good example is here on my DK. If I go and make them a fresh Arcanite Reaper from the interface, it doesn't have an enchant, and I cannot use rune forging on it because the target weapon is too low level. But then I have an Arcanite Reaper which I've already enchanted with Crusader, so there is still an argument for mailing heirlooms. Same deal with your pets, it just saves a bunch of bank space and allows you to clear out duplicates. And hopefully it will get rid of that one quest from innkeepers on every alt trying to give you your 6-month sub pet. What are my thoughts on this though? Well, I made a video before Wrath came out saying that the pet and loom tab would be good additions to the game, so yeah, they're good additions to the game. I think both of these are just upgrades over what we had in Wrath. Account wide on all of these is a bit more surprising though, but I think Wrath could benefit from more things for players to chase, and mount collections has always been a big chase point for players. Also, reputations won't be account wide, just in case you're wondering about that. To finish up, we have some class changes. Hunters get a brand new ability, Explosive Trap Launcher. This allows them to fire off their explosive trap from range. I kind of can't believe we're going to be getting this in the game. So Trap Launcher was a Cataclysm edition that allowed you to fire any trap from range. Whilst we aren't getting the full thing, we are getting it for the most important trap, Explosive. So as part of their rotation, hunters currently have to run into melee to drop a trap every time it is up. This contributes a huge amount towards their damage and is called trap weaving. It sounds cool in theory. In reality, there are a lot of bosses which have really poor hitboxes, which were clearly just not designed with a class that has a limited attack range in mind, speaking from experience here. This should be a noticeable DPS buff for hunters, allowing them to have less downtime and way less margin for error when placing traps. Good news for druids, priests and shamans, as Wild Growth, Circle of Healing, Ancestral Healing and Divine Hymn have all been adjusted to favour players over pets and guardians. Resto druids have had this thorn in their side with Wild Growth since Wrath has released. Would have been good a long time ago, better late than never I suppose. Demo Warlocks have seen changes to make Demonic Pact more consistent, and to remove scenarios where the Warlock would have to play in an unintuitive manner to maximise their Demonic Pact value. And Affliction stonks are going up even more as now Infernal resets on encounter end. That is the last big DPS cooldown in the game, added to the list of resets. Could be a good time for Warlocks in ICC. And that's everything from the patch and the PTR so far, so a lot of news there. Shadowmourne's going to be way easier to get, getting the LFD, a lot of info on Icecrown Citadel, account-wide mounts, pets and heirlooms, and some good class changes too. Seems like a pretty good patch to me so far. I'll be testing ICC some more and seeing if any further major updates are made going forwards. What are your thoughts on all these changes though? These are a lot of modern features coming to the game, and changes compared to how it was back then. Let me know below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.